My name is Tal Kitron with Appleruth Tutoring Services. I've been with the company for about 10 years in various capacities, but right now I work mostly as an online tutor, doing SAT, ACT, PSAT, LSAT, and a few other things. All my students this time of year, mostly juniors in high school, are really hitting levels of burnout that I've rarely seen before. And everyone's just kind of feeling overwhelmed, feeling like it's just a really, really crazy time of year. So if you're feeling that way, you're not alone. If you're the parent or guardian of a student who's feeling that way, you're certainly not alone. And we're just going to talk today about some ideas for what might be going on, how to diagnose, and then some thoughts for what we can do to try to push through challenges or this mid-semester slump that a lot of us are feeling. What you guys should see is closed captioning is available. You can also click out of it. I will leave time for questions and answers at the end, but if they occur to you as we go, please feel free to put them in the Q&A function and I'll get to them. And we'll definitely be out of here within an hour. I think it'll probably take maybe close to that. But yeah, I think without further ado, we'll go ahead and get started. So first, like I said, just this time of year, no matter what education level we're at, right? And we work with middle school and high school and college students, and it just seems to be a really tough time of year, right? People are just waiting for spring break. Then, we've got a bunch of work leading up to it. When we come back, it's very busy. So it can be really hard for students to be motivated, and it can be really easy to just feel totally overwhelmed. So step one is just realizing that's a thing that's happening for a lot of us, right? If you're feeling that way, you certainly have company. And so, some of the things we're going to look at today is trying to diagnose how and where and why we're struggling. There are definitely patterns that emerge, but every student's, of course, different and will have different sets of challenges. We're going to talk a lot about task initiation, persistence, and completion. So the three phases of completing tasks. And if you are seeing that in high school, like maybe we're sophomore, junior, senior year, usually if you're having these challenges, like, man, I just feel like I can't get these assignments done, right? I feel like I can get started, but I just having issues with the persistence part. Usually that's not a brand new thing. It just might be showing up for the first time as an issue that's causing, a drop in grades, or we're noticing it for the first time. So step one when diagnosing, like, why am I in a slump and what should I do, is this metacognition, thinking about how we think, what is working and what is not working well for us. It's important to look at both the positives and the negatives. So these are the three stages of getting things done. We're going to start, of course, with task initiation. And for some people, they don't have issues with this. It's like, okay, well, I can sit down, I can get started on this assignment, right? I'll study for, an hour or two, and then that's when they run into trouble. But others really just have a mental block of starting a task. I know this paper's due, but I'm going to procrastinate it until the last moment. I'm having troubles getting it started. Once I do start it, I'm good to go, right? So that's certainly something that I've dealt with at times. And I know many of my students do. But again, some people have no issues at all, right? Others will avoid and delay for as long as they possibly can. And some are they have no problems with the initiation part of a task. So thinking about if we are procrastinating, what is that really, right? Is this attentional? Is it some sort of learning difficulty that we haven't diagnosed or that we do know about? Executive functioning skills that are maybe a little bit lower, which we're going to talk about today. Maybe it's motivation, again, a big aspect of this presentation. But it could be just, I'm not motivated, I'm complacent, I don't care about this class or this grade for whatever reason. A lot of it has to do with disorganization, lack of structure, right? Maybe we just forget to study because we didn't realize the test was on Thursday. And then it could be, well, I'm sitting down to start the task, but then I get distracted. So I was about to start, but then I got a text and I just kind of went down that rabbit hole. So the first thing is deciding, well, why am I procrastinating? What is it actually that's causing me to delay? And some other reasons why we might do it, it may just be, again, lack of motivation, which could be because of a lower skill set, right? Sometimes that's how that presents. We're better at what we're interested in and what we value. So that often is something like I have no problem starting maybe my geometry homework because I like it, I'm good at it. But if I don't love creative writing, maybe I'll delay that task because I'm not as interested and I feel less good at it. So I do think that implicit fear of failure is a big part of really a lot of task issues. We just have students who are like, I just don't know if I can get this paper done the right way. And so this kind of perfectionist aspect can cause us to just not start it, right? And really put ourselves in a hole. And then we'll talk about clearing up our spaces, both physical and digital. Sometimes we're just in an environment that is distracting, right? There's TV and there's family members and there's pets and there's phones and there's music and there's friends. And all of those are competing. So we need to set up a way to zone those out when need be. When we need to work on a project or really dedicate ourselves to something. And this is just a continuation of that last slide, a lot of which we're going to get a little bit more into. I've seen a lot of bright students, like really, really bright students, procrastinate and have task initiation issues. I think because they're setting up obstacles for themselves, like self-handicapping. You say, well, if I wait until this time to start it, that's when I'm at my best, which is usually a fallacy. But some students really convince themselves, I'm best after midnight, the day the test is due, or the day the assignment is due, or the day of the test. So usually that's obviously not the case. We do better with more sleep. We do better with more time, right? And giving ourselves buffer zones. So I think a big first step is, if you are a procrastinator, think about why. Understanding that root can help us determine next steps and best course of action going forward. I do a lot of work on changing language, making sure that there's no negative self-talk, or that we're really shifting that. Because I have a lot of students who come in, they say, I suck at math. I'm bad at math. I hate it. Math is stupid. I'm never going to use it. Who cares? And those kind of things go hand in hand. People feeling like they're not good at something and, hey, this is stupid. So that's really a protection mechanism. If you feel like, man, this math teacher, I'm lost, this math class, I really don't feel good about, then that's the assignment that I might put off because I just don't feel like I'm going to do well in. If we can provide, as parents or as fellow students or ourselves or as executive function coaches or as tutors, if we can give them successes, so experiences of mastery, right? Oh, well, you hate geometry. Well, why don't we just at least look at triangle? I'm going to give you a triangle. Do you know the formula for area? Can we solve that? So look, you do know how to do that. Let's build off that, right? And that shows, they're not lagging behind. They're not, you don't want to compare yourself to others. It's just, what do I need to succeed is the better way to be looking at this, rather than, what is it that I am struggling with, or even just the most common feeling of, I'm struggling, I don't want to do this, right? So that's kind of the thing we're trying to push past. And something that Appleruth has started doing in the last couple of years is executive function coaching, which is super cool. It starts with what's called a mind print, which is like a mock test for your brain. And these, we'll talk about what they are, I think, on the next slide. Yeah. So here's some examples of EF skills, just because this is a relatively new term. But there are pillars of working memory, cognitive flexibility, self-control, but within all of that is planning, being organized, setting goals, inhibiting temptations and distractions, managing time, and so on. So going back here, it's not only okay to provide structural support for children or for students to help with this stuff, it's more than okay, it's really important. And I think that especially middle schoolers, but also like high school, sophomore, junior year, can really benefit from even a couple of EF coaching rounds, just to get a sense of what am I looking for, right? So like, even if it's a 30-minute session, a coach can ask you, what does your space look like? How do you, what distracts you, right? You can get to a lot with just a little bit of exploration. And it's important to remember that this is all on a spectrum, right? So these are skills, and everyone has them in their own unique balance. So you may be super strong at time management, but actually, for whatever reason, planning ahead is not your strong suit, right? Or maybe You can prioritize tasks and you're great at that, but then when the time has come, you're not able to monitor yourself and you're checking your phone for basketball scores or whatever. No matter what you do, these skills are developing, right? Even through middle adulthood, right? These skills are definitely things that develop, but they are also skills that can be coached and honed and developed more efficiently and more strongly and more cohesively. We talked about this bullet point at the bottom, metacognition. We also want to talk today about setting goals, and initiating tasks, of course, is a big part of it. But then if you set a goal, that will help you persist towards it and not lose sight of it. But if we become really good at thinking about the way we are thinking, so metacognitive thinking, self-awareness, that can open up pathways to access all the other skills, right? If you can understand, oh, this is why I'm showing up late all the time. I'm not giving myself a buffer and thinking about traffic. And so I'm always just starting off on the wrong foot. Now I'm going to set an alarm for 10 minutes earlier, and that might change everything. All of a sudden, you're not the person who arrives late all the time. Right? So little things like that can make a huge difference, but we often just aren't wired to think about the way we're thinking. We just do it, right? So it's easier said than done, of course. And this is something we'll come back to a couple times, but I've noticed this as a school teacher, right, in the public school system. Some students that I just thought didn't care. I was like, man, and I really didn't like them because of that, right? To me as a teacher, I was like, man, the student, they're not giving effort and they're unmotivated. And then when I dug a little bit deeper, almost always it was either there was something actually going on, and they were having emotional struggles, right? Or just really not feeling comfortable with the material, right? Or something's happening at home. But a lot of times it was also this person is low motivation because they just don't feel very good at the subject. They don't feel like they're strong with the material. That's again where just a couple little benchmarks of success, right? So not a test where it's on a curve and they don't do as well maybe as other students, but a special assignment or an in-class question that they can answer, right? Where you're just talking through something. Even that in a classroom setting can make a big difference. It's just important as an educator, but also as a parent, I think. And even just if it's you yourself listening to this presentation, think about, do I really is it that I'm unmotivated and don't care? Or is it that I fear that I'm not good enough at this? Because I think a lot of times it's the latter, right? And then just also not prejudging. If someone's unmotivated, there are a variety of possible reasons for that. We'll talk more about motivation later. We can teach a whole ACT, SAT session without really making any statements, right? It's all questions. It's leading questions and working us down the right road. But it's really important to trust your students, right, or your kids, and say, well, if I'm thinking about changing my metacognitive process and changing how I plan, right, in my calendars, you don't really want that to come from someone else, especially probably not mom or dad this time of life. It often falls on deaf ears, but from a tutor or a teacher or a friend or a mentor or coach, you'd always want this collaborative approach. What ideas have you got that we can start with, right? Make sure that the student knows that their ideas matter, because this is the person who we're trying to help, right? So of course you have to trust the student and give them agency. One way to help with that is planning all steps out leading up to a final exam or a paper or an ACT, right? What have you. So the future sketch is just you work backwards from the due date, and think about minute details. So, hey, my paper's due on Friday, office hours are on Wednesday, and there aren't any on Thursday. So I'm not going to go to that event on Wednesday that I wanted to go to with my friends. I'm going to go to office hours, because if I don't, on Thursday, I'm going to regret it. Right? Those are little things like that where, yeah, that feels like a sacrifice, but it's also, that's what we have to do to succeed, maybe for this particular assignment. So also thinking about well, hey, I don't want to schedule in 5 hours straight of work. Maybe I need to build in a break there. And, we'll talk about even putting those break times on your calendar. It's an important thing to do. Second step in just getting things done is the persistence. So once we started a task, which can often, like I said, be the hardest part, some people who didn't have issues with that might all of a sudden think, okay, well, I started it. It's due in a couple of weeks. I'm okay for now. I'm just gonna leave it. Some things that cause that, I mean, disorganization is the biggest one, because it's like, well, I forgot that it was due because I didn't work on it for a couple of days. So we can organize our thoughts, we can organize our digital space and physical space. A lot of EF coaches will have those big calendars, that have all the days of the month, and you can write out everything in there. Something like that, but just really creating structure at a macro level. So like, I know that each day for school, I have to wake up at this time, right? 5 minutes earlier than I've been waking up, right? I know that these are the 5 things I need to finish before I go to sleep and put out for the next day. Little things like that can then help you lead you down the road towards creating structure at more micro levels, like for each class and for each assignment, and knowing where your homework lives and knowing where to go when you need something, right? So you're creating resources for yourself by being more organized, less cluttered. We want to make it easier to make the right choice. So if you know that certain things distract you, right? Like it's usually the phone, right? But like, let's say, you know that there is an award show that you care about and you're constantly checking that, right? Or March Madness basketball scores. You want to make sure, if you have to really zone in and do work for a while, you got to put the phone on the other side of the room, right? That can be hard if you're expecting an urgent call or something like that. So thinking about, can we stop some notifications? If I have it like out there where I can hear it, but not grab it when I need to, will that help me? So these disciplined environments can be really hard to create, or at least I think there's a lot of inertia towards creating them. But if you do and you have this smart system, you have to rely much less on your own willpower, which is the goal, right? So it actually makes it easier for yourself because you've got the structured system. So I'll see students, they'll share their screen and I'll see like 7,588 emails unread. And it just spikes my anxiety, right? For some people, it doesn't. But for most of us, decluttering is a smart thing to do, minimizing distractions. I think having a regular study area is important, while acknowledging that if you're feeling like it's not working, lean into that. Maybe go to a library or a coffee shop or somewhere else, right, to accomplish something. Some people chew gum. Some people can listen to music in headphones. Others can't, right? I think keeping the phone either on airplane mode or away is obviously a very important thing too. But having an environment that feels like, okay, this is where I'm going to get work done. That'll help with all aspects of finishing tasks. You don't want to have all these things loaded up either on your laptop or desktop or phone. Thinking about, are there certain things that are distracting me, like my phone's going to ding and it's going to give me an email notification. For me, a few years ago when I transitioned out of a manager role, I just turned off Gmail notifications. So I figured nothing's going to be so important that I can't, I can respond within a few hours, I'll be fine. And it helped me not be constantly in work mode. I think this is also important for sleep, right? So if you're finding yourself struggling at night, right, having issues sleeping, think about what can you do to declutter there as well. But yeah, thinking about when you do have to go into big time work mode, what can we get rid of? What can we deactivate? How do we really make this blinders on? I'm doing work right now. And for everyone, it's going to be a little bit different. So the theme with this is make what's hard easy and what's easy hard. If you know you're distracted by a certain video game or by Twitter or Snapchat or whatever, make that harder for yourself to access, right? Delete the app or just download an app, limit screen time or whatever you need to do. And so you got to think about this, right? If you find yourself being a poor planner and it's not easy for you, think about how can we make it easier and better suited. This is a collaborative effort that's supposed to enrich and help you progress in life. These again are all things that develop naturally, but if we just feel like we're really not great at planning, that's not something that's going to change overnight by itself. You do have to work at it. Using clocks and watches, so even the stopwatch lap function on a smartphone, very, very helpful. Scheduling breaks in on the calendar, like if you've got a couple final exams, put your break time in there so that you are committed to it. And I mean, all-nighters I think are almost never a good idea, right? So like when I was in law school, I would work until I was very tired, right? Midnight or 1 a.m. But I wouldn't then stay up all night. I would sleep for at least a few hours, wake up maybe 4 or 5. And even just that little bit made a huge, huge difference, right? So for me, I knew that that's what worked. For others, it's obviously going to be different. And it's not always just because you're tired, right? It might just be, man, I've been working on this for 2 hours. My back's a little sore. It's nice outside, right? So thinking about how to keep healthy boundaries with time and work. And we, as in parents and guardians and mentors and friends and teachers and tutors and coaches, can help students establish routines. Anyone who's, like me, been in and out of the zone of working out, right? So like sometimes like you feel like, okay, I'm exercising every day. This feels great. It's automatic. And then if you get out of it for a while, it can be really hard to get on the treadmill or go for that bike ride or run. So same thing with work, right? Daily rituals are key. So just these little things that help us stay organized and set for the day. Final bit of just getting stuff done is task completion. And I think a big part of this is definitely the help aspect, but you've got these students who they can start the task, they can push through it, and then it's just this last bit, right? Where turning it in, right? Or just putting the finishing touches, something's there that's blocking us from doing it. I think this applies to really all aspects of task completion and motivation, but societally, we are not very good at asking for help. A coach and parents and teachers can work with students to help them know who's the right person to ask and how to ask. I think effective help seeking is crucial, right? I'm always grateful when a former student reaches out to me asking for help finding a job or an internship or advice, because that tells me, oh, well, I made it a safe place for them to ask for help, right? That's a big compliment coming from a former student who we work on that stuff, right? It's always like, ask your teacher for a recommendation early, right? And make sure that you make it easy for them to do it. Then you'll get a better recommendation, right? And that's common sense and polite. But even with this, if I'm feeling like I'm falling behind in this math class, right? Where do we go? A lot of people just ask their parents to help them with it, which can help, but that's not really gonna assist, especially when you get to college and need to advocate for yourself without a safety net, right? So this is just all part of it. Even if we're not using the actual deadline for the assignment or the paper, sometimes using artificial ones can help. So like, okay, I know it's due on Thursday, so I'm gonna get it done by Tuesday, because I know that if I don't, I'm gonna be too late. And so, life will happen. Maybe something just comes up and it derails everything and we lose a day. But if we plan for 2 days in advance, we're still okay. That buffer zone is incredibly helpful. So if you miscalibrate how long it will take you, you have this recovery option. You're going to be fine. Right. So thinking about just setting these artificial deadlines for yourself along the way. And some students really benefit from a list, right? So just like physically writing it out, could be on the computer, but sometimes it's better just to have it on a hard copy paper. And seeing 1 or 2 things come off that list, even if that's just build a smarter system, download Google Calendar app, and do one other thing, checking off things from a list can be really fulfilling, motivating, and lead to just more and more of that. Again, this is the final phase, but if we start the task and we push through it and we do great, but then we don't finish it and we don't turn it in, well, then we haven't completed the assignment. So this is just as important as the other parts, even though it comes last. And it is interesting that, some people, especially really bright students, just have a little block at this stage of it. So if that's you, think about why. We're going to switch gears a little bit now to talk about motivation. Doing well on time. I think probably 25-ish minutes to go here. And if you have questions, please do put them in the Q&A as we go. Motivation is there's a lot behind this. Every single behavior has some motivation behind it. So it can be really hard as a tutor or especially as a parent, but even myself as a student and a person, I don't always know what's motivating me. So that metacognition and thinking about it is like, okay, why do I care about getting this A? Is it really intrinsic or is it just to please someone else? If I'm meeting as a coach and working on executive functioning, we're going to be talking about goals, dreams, anxieties. Anxieties are the ones that come up easily. But it's like, oh yeah, I know what I'm anxious about. But then it can be way more helpful to actually talk about what do you want. And rapport, whether it's between a teacher and a student or parent or what have you, if you develop rapport, then by definition, you'll be more influential, right? So like I always try to have a friend-mentor relationship, and I'll share things about myself within reason. And, we'll talk very briefly at the beginning or in a break in a session about how things are going. But it's important because that shows that there's a level of trust, right? And so I don't want to assume the student is here because I've seen other students that are there. We want to really actively listen and think about, okay, so what I'm hearing is this, is that right? And what I'm hearing you say is this is where you're not feeling as good about, but this is where you're feeling stronger. And just that alone can really make a huge difference in building that initial rapport. That can all happen in a first meeting with an EF coach. And I think this is huge too. So of course, every student's different. So every student's values will be different. Got to figure out what is the currency the student trades in? What's lighting their fire? How might getting a better grade on this paper in this class actually impact our values because of what we're trying to do with our lives? Is the outcome relevant or important? If it's not, then that's harder, right? That's more difficult. We got to figure out how to fool ourselves into thinking it is, right? Or find the importance in it. But we just you gotta adjust based on motivational profile, and different things motivate different people. We can teach the skill. The will is the harder thing, right? That can be honed, but the will is at least half the battle of a successful outcome, right? So yes, we need the actual skills and tools, but we also need to have the motivation so that we are doing it for a reason. And this is something we mentioned a little bit earlier, but motivation deficits might just be masking skill deficits, right? So like, yeah, I'm thinking this pre-calculus class is tough because my Algebra 2 teacher wasn't great and I had to do it online because of COVID year. Right? That's a big thing that a lot of people are dealing with. And so maybe thinking back, well, who actually, this is not my deficiency, right? I'm sure other students in this class felt the same way. So what parts did I maybe miss? And how can we shore that up? Working with a tutor, for example. Learning differences, whether it's processing or working memory or ADHD or dyslexia, right? That can present as lack of motivation a lot of times. And just, we want to build frustration tolerance, but if a student's overwhelmed and overly frustrated, they will by definition lose interest. And even that could cloak something else that's going on, right? They're just distracted and can't muster the energy to focus on this class right now because something else is going on inside. So always good to think about that. And on occasion, you do get something where it's like we're working on this AP environmental science assignment and the student doesn't really care, right? It's really hard to say like, I want to get a good grade on the AP, but I do not care about this. So I think sometimes developing, this is one of the hardest parts about unearthing motivation and helping develop it, right? It's a really hard thing to do. But what you want to try to do is explain that there's this game that we're playing, right? You want to set up a system for yourself that's internally competitive. Think about what it is you want, what you're trying to achieve, and how in any little way, this AP environmental science class or assignment will help you. right? What do you want to do? Like, why are you even in high school? What do you want to do in college? And some people don't know yet, and that's okay. But if you know what you want to do in life, or you know what values drive you and motivate you, it becomes much easier to then tie the outcome to that service of values. Like when I was, I guess, coming out of law school in my late 20s and realizing that I really liked law school, but I didn't really want to practice law. I read this book called Zen and the Art of Making a Living, and it was really a life changer. But it's all about we are better at what we like, trying to find something that is a passion, which for me was, a few things, but education and helping people was definitely a big one of them, right? There was also some environmental justice and social justice and stuff that I still am interested in and do, but the fact that I was able to find something that I enjoy and that feels fulfilling, right, is huge. And I think a lot of students just feel like they're grinding for no reason. So validate those feelings. Yes, you probably will never use this math ever again. It is a little bit silly, but it'll be on the SAT, and SAT helps get us into college, and degrees will help you get your first job, right? And so that's part of the game. And some people are motivated by, again, totally different things. Athletic scholarships, who knows? This is the self-determination theory. You can see the three main components, which is competence, independence or autonomy, and relatedness. If we can fulfill and attend to these needs, better health psychologically, but also what we're really trying to build here is intrinsic internal motivation. So on that track or in that quest, some things you can do to help students be more motivated. I think giving them the ownership, right? Giving them choice whenever you can, validating feelings and acknowledging them to show respect. I trust my students and I respect them. And when they tell me I'm really busy, I'm tired, I feel it, I commiserate. Positive feedback is enormous, right? I'm extremely positive. I try never to say negative stuff. It's always couched in a positive. Because people will do better almost always with that reward system, right? You're doing a good job. Some of my students, it's sad. They're so shocked to hear someone say, like, you're doing such a great job, because they're used to being criticized, either internally or by others. I mean, a lot of it's negative self-talk. We don't want to have this must, should, ought, although I don't know who says ought, shall, right? You don't want to do that. It's more questions, being curious, delving into what and why and how, and being thoughtful and exploring, right? It's a game. And in that collaboration with your students, that's how you build the relatedness. One classic shift would be, instead of saying, well, if he would only try harder, he would do a lot better, right? Just because someone presents as unmotivated doesn't mean that's what's happening. Might want to shift that to, well, if we could just give him some success, he'd do better. I mean, I've seen that so many times. Just a little success, couple problems, right? One question in class, one piece of positive feedback, right, can make a world of difference and really just boost motivation and results. So these are just a couple other experts in the field, but mastery experiences have profound impact on self-efficacy beliefs. What that means is, if you can do a certain topic, right, again, sticking with geometry, and you can learn circles and you learn the formulas, and then you practice and you get 5 questions right, and it's something that you were feeling really not great about, but now you've just, hey, look, you did this question and this question and this question, I gave you nothing, you got them all. That can have a huge impact. It's no longer, I'm bad at math, I hate geometry. It's, okay, I get this part of it, right? That's step 1, right? And then we build on it. And it's always a we thing, right? I go, we go, you go. So this is, anytime someone makes a mistake, I want to encourage it. This is a safe place to make mistakes. Anytime we do anything remotely good, it's like, yes, that's exactly it. Especially if we flip the negative sign on the last question. If we do it right this time, that's a huge win, right? We made a mistake, we learn from it. That's how we grow. But having those successes is crucial. And as we think about, the upcoming transition for high school students, which for most people is going to be to college, whether we take a year between or just go straight there, this support autonomy balance becomes really different because we are moving usually out of parents' house and then off on our own into a dorm or apartment or just on campus. And even if you're close to home but not living at home, that'll change everything. So you want to start early to establish this balance between support and autonomy for your child. Same with just as a high school student, you want to be thinking for yourself. I want to do everything I can for myself, but I also then need to know when to seek help and how. So we can become smarter and better at how and when to do that while putting more weight on the autonomy side of things generally. This is what's called the zone of proximal development, where you basically want to build this frustration tolerance and introduce skills, but don't step in until we're totally lost. So I'll keep asking questions like, what's our first step? If we get stuck, what can we do? Can we use the answer choices? Can we pick our own numbers to plug in? But I'm going to try to ask questions and not actually give anything for as long as possible. And then if I have to give a hint, I will, right? But it's really about that, finding that zone of the students working, they're building frustration tolerance, but not letting them get to that overwhelm or over frustration. And then if we're truly stuck, then you can provide the minimal scaffold. So maybe it's, okay, well, here's a question similar to this that we saw. You see that? I'm going to leave it up on screen while you try this question. Good, you got it. Now I'm going to take this off screen, try the next one. And it usually works, right? Sometimes it takes a couple times, but that's how we progress. So as a coach or as a tutor, I might take it for a little bit. I'll say, okay, well, here's how you do the question, but I'm always shifting it back to the student, and ownership to the student is huge, right? So I want to transfer my belief in the student, which is sincere, right? And built through respect and work together, but transfer that to the student themselves. And that can be really hard if they have low self-confidence, right? Or just don't believe in themselves fully. So we need to make that shift so that the student themselves is thinking, yep, I can do this. And here's what I need to do to get there. When we choose goals, we want them to be SMART. Specifically, we need to be specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and timely. So not a sweeping, I want to get all A's, or even I want to get an A, right? We take it piecemeal. We set goals as we go. This is part of building little successes and redefining what success is. So, maybe I've got a low C. Let's try to get a 78 by the end of this month, an 80 at mid-semester. Maybe we can get to low 80s before the test. And if we can get an A, a low A on the exam, we can do solid B for the final grade, right? And maybe we're setting higher goals than that, but this would be a pretty good few month goal of getting from a low C to a middle or high B. Right? I feel like that's a good way of breaking up the goals to create little successes along the way. Another example is right here. So to get an A on my paper, I'm going to finish all the reading by Wednesday in case I need to go to office hours, draft my thesis by Friday, write the first draft before the 18th, office hours on the 19th, have it proofread by these two people by the 23rd, and then it's due on the 28th. That makes big projects way, way more manageable. So that's a big thing that people aren't really doing. But if you have that organization, it will make your life better and easier. And of course, I know I'm talking to some parents who are thinking, well, yes, this sounds great, but if I tell this to my son, he's not going to listen. There's some merit to that. A lot of it, like I said, will fall on deaf ears from parents, but I feel like a couple sessions with a coach can help, and just kind of showing them I trust you, but this is how you own it. So yeah, I do get that sometimes it's really hard to see, well, yeah, my kid's not going to listen to that, but there are ways to get through. We can help students as, again, as teachers or as parents with proper goal setting. So again, these short-term goals, that's just going to be more manageable the whole way through. A lot of students aren't setting goals. They're just kind of flying by the seat of their pants. We generally see those who do set goals, whatever they are, have increased confidence, more competence, more commitment to actually achieve those goals. And I do think there's something to the short-term goals giving you these extra chances to succeed, right? Just those mastery opportunities are so important for students at this age. And again, that self-determination theory. So giving students agency and choice, more control even over small choices. Hey, do you want to start with reading or math today? Almost always they'll say, I don't care. But sometimes they know, right? That empowers the student. So I'll give them the chance, right? Anything you'd like to start with, what questions you have for me, and so on. And if we're starting a coaching session and I know it's just purely driven by parents and the student's not on board, got to get buy-in, right? So it's like, why am I here? Or why are you here? Well, my parents told me I had to. Okay, why do you think they did that? And what do you think I can help with? Try to kind of put the onus on them and make it a respect thing, right? Like I'm going to give 110% always and do everything I can to help you. I just expect the same in return. And I always respect teachers who did that. You also don't want to motivate with negativity almost ever. Yes, there's a time and a place where some anxiety can, you have this optimal zone of stress that can help you certain times, but generally motivating with fear, anxiety, and guilt are not going to be very effective. It's a lot better, especially if you're working with a student. You want to always be positive. You want to motivate with dreams and hopes and successes. So yeah, I mean, I would never, especially in a coach-student relationship, try to introduce one of these dynamics. I think that would be a big no-no. It's also important when you're thinking internally that you're not motivating with these things. So I mentioned these words, but intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. I think part of this is trying to make it into a competitive game. Sometimes siblings are competitive with each other, but it can be good to be internally competitive with yourself. Here's what I faltered on last time, so here's what I'm going to work on this time. Last time I got a 74, I want to make sure I get at least a B here. And focusing on process rather than outcome is usually better, but trying to figure out what does it mean really to you, because those are going to have, usually intrinsic motivation will have the best results. This is just to show that high expectations are usually good. There is a limit to that, but if you tell students, hey, I'm nitpicking here just because I think you're very good at this. Like I tell my high scoring ACT, SAT students that all the time. I wouldn't mention this with everyone, but there's a faster way you could do this question when you look at that. And I only say this because you're so good at this and I just want to make sure that you're really efficient. That's going to come off better, right? It's going to increase motivation. It just feels better for both teacher and student. You can see here when they got that feedback of, I'm giving these notes to you because I expect you to do well and I know you can do well. A lot more people, twice the amount, were willing to do revisions, right, and change their essays. And the other half felt like, nah, not going to do it. Got to be a little bit careful with rewards. You want to kind of eventually phase them out. But the danger with that is if you already have intrinsic motivation and you introduce rewards, that can undermine it. So be careful to do that if a student's already motivated. And I've got a lot of people who are like that. Then again, there's a lot of students who aren't intrinsically motivated. I want to get a high test score because my dad wants me to go to Princeton. For that, rewards, even if it's just positive feedback, or like, hey, you're quite good at this, right? You really do understand what the SAT writers are getting at. that alone can engender their own interest. So I've seen students who didn't have buy-in at first, but then it's like, oh, okay, I'm good at this, and I'm seeing, some actual benefit that can help them be more motivated. And again, be careful of overusing rewards, but praise, recognition, affirmation, all that stuff, positive feedback goes a really, really long way. If someone is really presenting as low motivation, right, or maybe it's low skills, we don't know, use rewards early and often, but then kind of phase them out, right? So as a coach, I want to shift the focus to the student and their own self-appraisal. So you want to direct the student to own and internalize their gains, right? So eventually, instead of saying, oh, wow, that's really good, you want the student to have that internal monologue of, yep, nailed it. I really did well here. I feel good about myself. And that's a great thing when it happens. It takes a lot of work. Want to be specific, want to be really thorough. And I don't hold back when offering praise, right? It's like, it's amazing that you got all that homework done. I know it's a tough time of year. I'm really impressed and appreciate that you did that, because I know you could have delayed it to next week and that would have been okay too. But that's great that you finished. Anytime you see this persistence and like a use of a new process, you want to reinforce it. Otherwise, it won't become hardwired. And so if a student comes and starts with this really negative self-talk, I'm worthless at this, that's my initial appraisal. We're not trying to move them to, I'm a genius, I know everything. And I'm not going to try to tell them they're that, because they don't believe it, and that sets you up for failure. So we're just trying to move towards the middle, recalibrate self-appraisals. Maybe we can get to I'm Einstein, but we just want to take it step by step, right? And not try to do that all at once. That's unreasonable and ineffective. And we all end up in our parents' basement for some time, and there's no shame in that. But we do want to shift language on not avoiding failure, but to achieve or approach success. So it's not, I'm scared, I don't want to end up being a failure, I don't want to end up this. It's, well, this is what I want to have happen. And sometimes we really have to think about what that is if we're not sure what we want. But working towards those tangible goals is huge. And as a coach and as a teacher, I'll tell my students real stories about my own challenges and obstacles, right? So I can relate. I went to college, and I went to high school, and I went to middle school, and I had all these challenges to overcome, and I've seen it all. So just hearing that from someone else, man, oh, so you had a bad teacher too and fell behind, and had AP US history and had mountains of work. That relatedness goes a long way, and just makes them almost just feel like a little bit more at ease. Some things to limit. All this sweeping statements, black and white, I'm going to get this, or I always mess this up. You want to make sure to just debunk that and help recalibrate. So, if someone's saying, yeah, I can't get this. It's like, all right, let's dig into that. What do you think you're struggling with? What part of this don't you like? Is it the variables? Is it the fractions? What is it? And be really specific, and then think about, okay, once we do one question, how's this one similar? Do you see how it relates? Right. So we can shift that type of negative thinking and sweeping statement. It's also really hard to do this, but try not to compare yourself with other students. We see this a lot with test scores. People get discouraged because they hear anecdotally about someone who's got a perfect math score. And so it's just, you got to keep your eye on the prize. Where did you start? Where are you going? Right? It's got to be self-focused. You don't want to be competitive almost ever with other students. In a rare situation, that can be good, but usually not. And again, make sure that students own their successes. So not just giving them positive feedback, but if they're reluctant, it's like, hey, do you see how good this is? I work with thousands of students, and I'm going to tell you this is impressive. This is good. I will make sure that they accept it. And if they don't, like if they don't hear it a lot and reinforce it, it might not stick. So it's important to kind of give that positive reinforcement again and again. Here in our last 5 or 10 slides here. So this, I think this one is more about tying behaviors to outcomes, but a lot of this is more of the same. I think the big thing on this slide is effort. So whether that's a test or whether it's just creating your own system or succeeding at school or being more organized, it almost always comes down to just putting in the effort. Figuring out how you think and what will work for you can really do wonders over actual like intuitive skill, right, or luck. And in my experience, the students who work the hardest, both like my classmates, but also the ones I've worked with as a teacher, do better, right? Not the ones who are just really initially like get it and are really smart, but don't work as hard. You see the ones who like grow and work hard, just be more successful in school and in life. We also have to make sure students believe something's possible, right? If I think, well, I'm never going to get this type of grade in this class, it's not going to happen. That's self-fulfilling. So we have to get buy-in and get them to own and embrace this reality that we're creating together, right? So it's like, well, I hear you. I know it's going to be a daunting task. Let's do it step by step. Making progress and a couple of successes will go a long way. I think it's important to, again, develop this respect and mutual integrity, right? So if I commit to giving my absolute best and thinking really hard about what's going to work for you and being available whenever you need me, will you commit to doing the same, right? So now it's about trust, it's about respect, and that's usually going to be really effective. And then here, it's not realistic to say if someone's generally pessimistic and see all these challenges, it's not realistic to say, be more optimistic. Likewise, if someone's an eternal optimist and they kind of have the pie in the sky mentality, but then maybe overlook some challenges, that can be a different obstacle and you're not going to be able to turn them into a pessimist, nor would you want to. So we want to kind of combine these. It's really like plan for the worst and hope for the best, but understanding that the best and the easiest isn't generally how life goes, right? So there's like this future me issue, and if I'm really thoughtful about what challenges are on the way, then we're more likely to make it there. If-then rules are a good way to basically substitute for your own willpower. So like you have this thing in your head of, well, I know that when I come home from school, I get distracted because I watch a couple TV shows. So if that's happening, then I must wait to watch TV until after I finish my homework, right? Write down a few if-then statements and stick to them. That's a specific way to deal with this problem. All right, as we wrap up here, this is good. So self-regulating motivation. I think a couple ways to look at that is, again, these if-then statements. If I finish reading this chapter, then I can send 3 pictures on Instagram. If I don't finish reading this chapter, that's a punishment, then I can't do Snapchat or surf the net or check my phone. So I think for different people, there'll be different levels of effectiveness. Some people actually really do well with this reward punishment system. Others, it's more like, well, they're optimists, I think, especially if they can finish a task and then that allows them to open up something fun, then that could be helpful for them. I think more people are going to be the punishment. If I don't finish this, I can't do that, right? Hold off on it. And you want to do good self-talk, both short-term and long-term, right? Yep, you got this question, you're getting this concept down. Longer term, right? It's like, what are my goals? So when you've got those feelings of, I want to drop out of this class, or I just want to give up, think about, well, what's my actual motivation, right? And how can I frame it to something that matters to me? And motivation generally does and can align with seeking a meaningful life, right? So it's important to think about, yes, maybe you will never see this math class or topic again. It doesn't matter. But if your goal is to become a social worker or to become a biologist, or become whatever, and contribute to the well-being of others, this is a step on that path. Don't buy laptops, but also don't avoid frustration. We need to have these frustrating experiences because that will help us build and get through that frustration and figuring out what is it we need internally and externally to do that. So frustration and mistakes, they're important. For parents, definitely more adaptive to use failure as a tool, right? So not as a punishment. Why did that happen? What did you learn? Right? And the tone is going to be really important there. If this is something you want, it's something you really have to work for. Again, that's going to come off better from a teacher, maybe, or a coach than a parent sometimes. But kids need honest and constructive feedback. So trust them and give them that. And then, of course, if a student has more struggles, challenges, setbacks, frustrations, they will be more likely to be able to bounce back, Gumby style. Whereas if not, we don't build that resilience. We're less able to adapt when stressors come up. So on that note, we practice making mistakes, handling setbacks, being frustrated. Mastery over adversity is almost kind of a misnomer. It's hard to be a master over adversity, but getting that practice of having adversity and having challenges and realizing, well, I got through this, I can get through that. These desirable difficulties can be really key. And finally, as we're reaching the end here, just again, reiterating, feelings of frustration are important, they're crucial, they're good. We don't always, they don't always feel good in the moment, but making mistakes is the absolute best way to learn. We'll learn a lot more from mistakes than successes. And I think that's a good note to end this on. We've got a couple minutes for questions, so please submit. We're also going to launch a poll that if you'd like to fill out real quick, that'd be great. And then these are the things that Appleruth offers. EF coaching, which I mentioned, that starts with the mind print to kind of show what our balance of skills is. We do academic prep, so classes in school, AP exams. You can see that poll launch now. And then test prep, which is really my bread and butter. I see one question here. The question is, does Appleruth have tutors that cover more than one subject for efficiency, so like chemistry and math? Yeah, I would say most of the tutors who do in-school subjects are like that. Like if there's a math and science person and they can tutor chemistry, they're almost always also tutoring pre-calc and calculus and algebra and geometry. So yes, absolutely. There are tutors who, like if you work with someone on a class, you like them a lot, you can request them for other classes. So yeah, definitely. Leave it open for another minute or so for any questions. And if you have others, please feel free to reach out to Appleruth. All right, that's good. Well, I very much appreciate you all joining. I hope it was helpful and hope you all have a great rest of the evening.